Welcome back. You're still watching Far Breakfast on Citizen TV. It's time for us to wrap up our news review this morning with Senators Moses Kajwang, Kimani Wamatangi and Isaac Mwaura, as well as Titus Hamala, member of the National Assembly representing Lurambi constituency. Now, just before the break, and we want to look at the final headline, and this has to do with NASA's demands. They say no repeat poll until our demands are met. But before that, Senator Kimani Wamatangi wanted to react to Senator Kajwang's statement, and I must say he explained, and quite eloquently so, their reasoning behind the boycott. What is your reaction, Senator, before we go to this final headline?
Yes, I wanted to say to Senator Kajwang, yes, if indeed, as he says, that the disagreement is not the constitution of Parliament, but the procedure by which Parliament was opened by the President, and hence business commenced. One, I believe what they're premising their actions on, Fred, is Article 134 of the Constitution, and I'm sure that's what Senator Kajwang was explaining. But that article is very clear. Actually, you don't need a lawyer to interpret that article of the Constitution on temporary incumbency and the powers the President has to continue to act, and his status right now is very well explained. You know, when that article talks about temporary incumbency, it has two key issues it points out. First, that it starts at the time the first vote is cast for the President until the time when the President-elect, and it is very clear, the President-elect is sworn in. That is the period of a temporary incumbency. Now, we don't have a President-elect because you know, the election was nullified. So and still the same Constitution is very clear that the term of a President ends when another President is sworn in. I mean, I don't want to go to that argument because they know the law. But Fred, you know, amongst the functions that the Constitution has bestowed on the Supreme Court, and NASA knows that very well, part of those functions and the requirement of law is to give an opinion where there is doubt as to how either anyone or any institution should act. What is so difficult about NASA going to the Supreme Court, saying this is what we think? And that was my question. Give us an interpretation of the law, what it says, should we continue in Parliament? But in the meantime, this is what we're doing. But I'll tell you why they cannot do that, although they know that that is the way they should go. And they also know that there's really no issue, the law is very clear. The reason why they will not go is because, one, they have an agenda that is clear and well cut.
Explanation of the issue of who chairs a House committee.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I'm saying, Fred, is this: that the reason why they will not seek any other alternative as to how they conduct themselves is because they are already rolling out a worked-out plan on how they will, one, discredit the processes, two, discredit anything that is happening right now, and three, precipitate a crisis. Okay. Such that the elections of the 17th of October can, in advance, according to their actions and what they want to sell to the members of the public, look illegitimate. And once they lose the election, then they will have a fallback position and go back to court again to say the same thing they were saying.
Thank you, Senator.
So that's the storyline.
Thank you for taking us to that particular discussion. That's the final headline we want to look at, and it's on page 4 of this Daily Nation. No repeat poll till our demands are met. Opposition will not only boycott fresh election, but block it altogether if it fails in getting changes. I might also want to quote another caption within that story on page 4, and it's titled, "Doom Looms, we might not have elections," says Ndi. Head of NASA Technical Committee David Ndi has told Kenyans to contemplate the possibility of not having a repeat presidential election if critical concerns raised by the opposition are not addressed. The Economist argues that all processes by the IEBC should be participatory as per the Constitution, but he says the overarching public interest is how the nation can resolve this political crisis, and he says if we don't, it will precipitate a constitutional crisis. Titus Hamala.
Yeah. Fred.
Are you certain we are going for elections come October?
Fred, I just seen the President talking to the Kisii delegation in Nakuru, where he was saying somebody steals your cow, you buy a cow, then you know you go to court, and he gave all that story. And I want to say that we in NASA, this is our position. The criminals who bungled the election, the criminals who messed the election on the 8th of August are still the same guys who want to oversee the election on October 17th. That is not right. And that's just why we are saying our demands are just in order. We want those guys to step aside. One by the name of Ezra Chiloba. And you know, he would have done us proud, because he's one guy, and one person cannot hold the country at ransom. This is a guy who's supposed to step aside so that we can go to the election with a new team, people that we have faith in. It's not about NASA. It's not about Jubilee. It is about future elections. You know, we correct it now for future. We are correcting it now for 2022. Even those people who want to run 2022, now they are cheering leaders on the Jubilee side. They don't know what they are doing, because it is a danger. It is something we are setting in place, and it cannot be corrected. And you know what? Let me tell you something, just pulling you back. Somebody is suffering from an identity crisis. I mean, I've heard the president say, I'm a sitting president. Yeah, he's there. He's the president, and we know that, and he doesn't have to just thump over the same. We in NASA, we are simply saying, we'll go to the polls if those thieves and criminals have stepped aside. We cannot have the same bunglers and the same criminals right there in the arena. They want to take care of the election, and yet they're the same guys who have put us where we are. That is our position.
Senator Isaac Mwara, what do you say to that?
I think first, listening to my very good brother Bishop here, I believe he's a social democrat, as his political party or a coalition purports to say. You are, innocent until proven guilty. And we cannot go on a mob lynching where you identify individuals and you want them to carry the cross for everybody. Ezra Chiloba is a Kenyan, and I think I have known him since the time he was an officer at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the UN and all of that. And I think he is the most experienced officer at the IEBC. He happens to be the CEO. You remember Wafula Chebukati actually said that they came 7 months to the elections. Remember, Fred, we are in this situation because people went to the streets to say IEBC must go. They had planned, yet Johan Kriegler had told us that we need to have an election at least in 2 years or so before elections. So this is a crisis that was precipitated. It is on the same basis that you see individuals saying that...
Do you foresee a crisis, Senator?
It's the same basis, Fred, that individuals are saying that they have some demands that have to be acceded to, and we cannot have an election, we are going to stop an election. That is anarchy. That is anarchy. The IEBC itself has pronounced that, and what we are seeing is some bullying of independent institutions by Raila Odinga and his group. And I want to answer my friend Moses Kajwang and say, yes, indeed, I was going on the wrong tangent. That is why I became Paul, at least not Paul Matangi, but I became, I saw the light, and I really regret that I ever believed in the course of your party, because it is not true. It is based on the fact that it is either Raila Odinga's way or the highway. Okay. And that is where we want to differ, because this country, if at all you believe in the true tenets of democracy, you must allow independent institutions that are created by the country. Indeed, you may want to actually facilitate them to conduct, because we are not speaking about a judgment, Fred, that has actually indicted certain officers. We are having mob lynching before even the judgment is out. And then you start saying that these are actually genuine demands. These are political demands that are aimed at ensuring that we don't have, confidence in the IEBC, we don't have confidence in the electoral process, only to facilitate an outcome that is only political, that suits certain people. And let me say this, Fred, that when we look at the Constitution about the incumbency of the presidency, as Senator Matangi has explained, really there are functions that the president is not supposed to do, even if he was a temporary president, which is not, because the first vote was nullified. And that's number one, appointment of people into constitutional offices like cabinet secretaries, judges and diplomats. Number two is the power of mercy. Number three is to confer national honor. And so to mislead the nation that the president did not have the power or capacity to address the first sitting of the 12th parliament is not true. The president has all those other powers apart from those three.
We have 32 days left to the next elections, to the date set by IEBC for the next election. NASA will be meeting IEBC. These demands, do you think they'll be met? Because the talk is that NASA is actually looking to precipitate a crisis, that they're not keen on the election, that all these demands are intended to ensure that no election happens. If I may quote David D, what we face is a situation that an election that meets constitutional standards may not be possible even in the next 35 days. He said that 3 days ago. Now it's 32 days.
We must understand where David D is coming from. David D is making what he calls a prognosis. He's looked at the environment, he's looked at what is going on, and as a public intellectual, he can predict that we probably might not be ready to conduct proper elections. Fred, the Supreme Court reversed the election on 8th of August on certain grounds. Those grounds, we have only gotten a summary, and my brother Wamatangi has spoken about the need to have a detailed judgment. The only area where I don't agree with him is that the detailed judgment must be delivered immediately. We need to ask ourselves whether the 14 days available to the Supreme Court to determine these issues is sufficient for them to look at the evidence and to come up with a decision and to come up with a reasoned judgment. We have set a date of 17th of October without seeing the detailed judgment or the detailed ruling of the Supreme Court. We don't even know what we are supposed to rectify. Jubilee keeps telling us that we are lynching people, and yet we have not seen the detailed judgment. On what basis did IBC decide that 17th of October is going to be the date for the fresh elections? What if the Supreme Court comes up with sweeping recommendations that must be implemented before we go into another election? Because the difference between Jubilee and NASA is that NASA are saying uchaguzi bora, and Jubilee are saying bora uchaguzi. Then they are saying they are ready for elections even if it's today, and they are even quite contemptuous about it, that even if you make Musalia Mudavadi the chairman of IBC, we will still win. For them it is bora uchaguzi, as we are saying tunataka uchaguzi bora. And that is why we have a problem with the 17th date. Raila Odinga does not talk of boycotting 17th. We are saying that there is a likelihood that we will not have elections on 17th, because the Constitution gave the IBC 60 days, which lapses on 1st of November. The rush by IBC to set the 17th date is suspicious, and more so when it comes on the back of recommendations coming from senior officials within the Jubilee government. We want to have a final election. You know, the Constitution, the way it is crafted, there is nothing that stops a Kenyan from going to court even after the next election that we're going to have. And it can be a cycle without an end. We need to get it right. And Kenyans must also ask themselves, we spent 40 billion shillings in the first election. We are going to spend 12 billion Kenya shillings in an environment where nurses have been on strike for more than 100 days. Can we afford to rush into an election without preparation, and then once NASA wins, then Wamatangi will be the guy going to the Supreme Court to seek a reversal of a victory? We must get it right. We are cognizant that elections must be held within the 60 days. It does not have to be 17th. 17th is a date that was gazetted by the IBC. It can be degazetted and regazetted again once we have a date upon which we are confident that all the conditions that shall be laid out by the Supreme Court in their detailed ruling will have been fulfilled.
Senator Wamatangi, finally, what do you have to say to that, even as we wrap up?
Well, two quick things. First, Senator Kajwang, then to your admission, really, that's precisely why I said, and now I believe you concur, that there are particular sections of the law that will require to be amended, including that period that is allowed the Supreme Court to come up with a decision. That's the first thing we should amend, to give them ample time. By the time they come up with a decision, even if it was 30 days or how many days, but they should be able to address the decision through a judgment. Now, secondly, you know, those 60 days which are allowed to IEBC to conduct an election could even be the following morning after the decision is made by the Supreme Court. So there is no time limit, and that is why the Supreme Court was keen and alive to the fact that that is the provision of the law, and they gave that latitude to conduct another election in those 60 days. Now, see, in the judgment that was given by the Supreme Court, there is nowhere where the Supreme Court said that NASA, after this decision, you go and come up with a raft of recommendations that you should go to give to IEBC, including those demands that then will allow the election to be conducted. And so the same beneficiaries of the Supreme Court decision now have decided to go against the same judgment and the same decision arrived by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said conduct the elections within that time and gave that mandate expressly to IEBC. Said it is IEBC to conduct the elections without allowing or making provisions for either NASA or any other one person to go and make their own special demands. And so that's why we are saying that what NASA is doing is they're craftily, very coyly hiding behind several excuses so that they can, one, disrupt the process, two, in advance illegitimize it and also skunk it, such that by the time as they are saying an election is held in the terms of NASA, and that's good terminology, my brother Senator Kajwang, that uchaguzi bora, but bora does not have to translate to be an accent to all the demands, including the unrealistic ones. Okay. If that's what you're saying, by NASA, such that they say now, when this ground has been leveled this way, yes, then this is the time when we can be able to go to an election. And remember that part of the expected election process, Senator Kajwang and your friends in NASA, is that you can lose, and you already lost the election in the first place.
Senator,
you can lose it again. And that will still be a good election.
Our time is up. I'll give you each gentleman 30 seconds to give your final remarks. Let's start with Titus Hamala. 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, Fred, thank you very much. Number one, I thank God and I thank the people of Lurambi for giving me this great honor to be here. One, Kenya is bigger than an individual. What we want is a united Kenya. It's not about tribes. It's not about Kikuyu, Luya, Kalenjin. It's about one Kenya, one people. And what we want is a fair, free and credible election. And we get through the process fairly and with transparency, and once we get through that, we unite as a country and we move on. And one thing I just want to say, please, let us not sell our IDs. People from Western Kenya, from my Mlente nation, to Siwuze Vitambulisho, please, let us use, that is what we are going to use as our weapon to send Jubilee out of power.
Thank you, Bishop. Next, Senator Isaac Mwaura, 30 seconds, please.
I think I really want to say all the jubilated people, we know that our victory was bungled by ODM and its cohorts. We are angry, like our president. Let us turn that anger in ensuring that we come out in large numbers on 17th of October. Let us also use any means to ensure that these saboteurs do not have their way. We have bent so much for so long. It is time to stand up, and it is now bare knuckle. We are strong. We are ready to ensure that indeed we are firm and stamp the win of Uhuru Kenyatta as our president.
Thank you, Senator Moses Kajwang.
It is Wole Soyinka who said that a tiger does not pronounce its tigritude, and it is usually unnerving when the president has to remind us that he's a president. It shows us that there's something wrong. I want to appeal to the president to remember that he's a symbol of national unity. He is the head of state. He's not just the head of Jubilee. And he needs to sober up and shepherd and head this country into a position where we can have elections that are acceptable to Kenyans. We will participate in an election that is free and fair. The conditions that we have set forth are not unrealistic, and they've not been plucked from the air. Most of them arose out of the registrar of the Supreme Court's report to the court itself when the verification of data and forms and technology was undertaken. We are not inventing new conditions. We will go into an election that is properly organized, and we are saying tunataka uchaguzi bora, sio bora uchaguzi.
Thank you, Senator. Finally, Senator Kimani Wamatangi.
Yes, I want to remind Kenyans of the provisions of Article 2 of the Constitution. It says that every Kenyan has an obligation to defend the Constitution. And that is my whole argument this morning, that as Kenyans we have given in way too long, that we have allowed a few individuals to continue to hold us a ransom, to direct and demand that we can only live and act in a certain way, And it is only to their satisfaction that this country can continue to move. But I want to say this to Kenyans this morning, that we must have a country. We must be able to chart our own course. We must be able to exercise that sovereign power that has been bestowed upon us, including determining how we are going to live and how we are going to be led. And so, in this coming election, and in the intervening days between now and then, we have to claim that right as bestowed upon us between Article 1 and 2 by ensuring it is us who show the direction as to how this country should be, not demanded upon, and we are going to refuse fully. And I want to urge my fellow Kenyans, we refuse completely to be drawn either into chaos, into anarchy, or into any direction that is going to compromise our safety, our security, and our future. We must claim who we are right now and refuse to be misdirected.
Thank you,
on
Senator.
the 17th we come out, we vote, determine how we want to be led and who will lead us.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Kimani Wamatangi, Senator Isaac Mwaura, Senator Moses Kajwang, and member of the National Assembly, Titus Hamala, representing Lurambi constituency. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for helping us understand the headlines this morning. Thank you for your very well-considered opinions. Remember, Power Breakfast still continues. Do-it-yourself tips from Joey Muthengi coming up, and also Chef Ali Mandri is cooking up some breakfast. Remember, it is Thursday. Willis Waburu will be chomping on something in a short while. Remember, the hashtag to use up until 9 a.m. is Power Breakfast. You can also text us on 22422. My name is Freddie Ndimuli. From me, it's good morning.